it's Miss Lacey here, and today I'm going to show you this week's grab and go, which is clay charms. So the first thing you're going to get is the instructions. You're going to have a sheet of wax paper, which will be to use for your work surface so that you're not ruining any tabletops and things of that nature, and also so that the air drying clay won't stick to anything. You'll have a pouch of air drying clay. You're going to have 3 cups. So you'll have 2 different colored paints. This one comes with red and brown. And then the 3rd cup is going to be your Mod Podge, which will be for your finishing touches at the end. After making this charm, you're going to have 2 options. You can either turn it into a magnet or turn it into a necklace. So we've got both. A magnet with an adhesive backing and some string to make your necklace. And the string that we provide matches the paint that we provide. You don't have to use those. If you have string and paint at your house, you're free to do with whatever you want. And finally, a toothpick. So that's what's going to be in your kit. So the additional supplies that you're going to need from home are going to be some paper towels, dry ones and wet ones, some tape so that you can tape down your wax paper to the table. You're going to need a paintbrush, a sponge, or a cotton swab so that you can paint with. I unfolded a paper clip to use to make marks on my beads to give it some texture. And you're also going to need something to cut out your charm into a circle. And I found that the big glue sticks work perfectly. It makes a perfect circle that you can cut out. You're welcome to use whatever you have at home. The charms are about the size of a quarter, so if you want to trace a quarter and do it that way, you can go about it that way. I also want to say that whenever you're planning this craft, it is going to take longer than a day because there is a drying process. So wherever you decide to do this project, make sure it's an area that can be undisturbed for a few days and left alone to dry. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so as I mentioned before, the clay charms craft is going to take several days to complete. So in day 1, we're going to work on the shaping and detailing. So the first thing you're going to want to do is place the sheet of wax paper down on a flat surface. This is going to be used to protect your work surface area and keep the clay from sticking. And then the next thing we're going to do is break off a piece of clay and start conditioning it. So I'm going to grab some clay to work with here. And remember, whatever you leave behind, because you're going to use this later, you want to seal the bag back up. That way it doesn't dry out. So to condition it, you're basically going to knead it and play with it by squishing and rolling. This isn't really super necessary with the air drying clay. It would be different if you were using the baking clay, but this is already pretty ready to go. So the next step you're going to want to do is choose the color that you'd like the charm to be. And remember I said that in this kit we're going to have the red and brown. Your kit might be different, or you can use paints of your own. But basically what you're going to do, I want this one to be red. Now, I'm going to be realistic with you. Because this clay is already an off-white color, you're mixing that, red with an off-white or whatever color you use. So it's not going to be like this vibrant red. It's going to be a pink, or it's going to be lighter than the original red. And that's the same with whatever color you go with. But anyway, so you're going to add a little bit at a time. So you're going to dip your paintbrush. And this is the messy part. But you're basically going to fold it in on itself and just start squeezing and folding to get that color in the clay. And it's going to get all over your hands. So you'll see that it kind of creates like this little marbled effect. Now you might choose to go and then just stay with that marbled effect. So now I'm going to lay it flat again. And I'm going to add some more. And we're basically just going to keep on adding until this clay has turned a different color. And it seems like it just takes forever to do this, and you're looking at it and you're like, it's not even changing colors. But it is. Slowly but surely it is. Some people use Sharpie markers and just kind of like dab the marker onto it. This paint is acrylic paint, which is the #1 recommended type of paint. You could also use tempera paint, which is water-based, but it said the highly recommended was acrylic, so that's what we're going with. Try to get the best results. Yes, my hands are a mess, but don't worry, it washes off with soap and water. No big deal. All right, we can see that this is turning a color. If you want to look at the original to it. All right, I'm going to put just one more coat, and then I think I'm going to call it good. Because you do want to leave a little bit of paint left over for day 2, whenever we are, doing the details of it and making that stand out. It seems like the more paint you add to the air drying clay, the more dried out it becomes. So I guess that's like one of the drawbacks of using the air drying clay as opposed to the clay that you would bake in the oven. So as you can see, I've got this nice rosy color that even has like some little specks in it still because I haven't blended it super well, but I'm worried about it drying out, so I'm going to go ahead and start that. So the next step you're going to want to do is roll the clay into a ball. So you'll use your palms for this, just like you're doing some Play-Doh. There's our ball. Flatten it onto the wax paper using your palm. And you're going to make sure that whatever you do when you're flattening it out, that you want the thickness to be the same all the way across. And I used quite a bit of clay just now with this, so you're going to push it down and get it thinner. Now you can choose whatever thickness you like, but remember that the thicker it is, the heavier the charm or magnet will be, and the thinner it is, the lighter but more fragile it'll be. But this is completely up to you on, the thickness. Don't worry about the edges because that's all going to get cut off anyways. But now I think it's good and flat for me, how I want it. So next we're going to either stamp or draw on a small design in the middle of the flattened piece of clay. If you have a stamp at home, that's great. I'm not providing you with any stamps because we didn't even have any stamps. So everything I did practice-wise was free drawn. So this is where the cool toothpick will come in. Now when you're making the design, you're going to want to poke light holes into the shape that you want. It's kind of like making a dot-to-dot game for the image. And then once you've made those dots, you go back and connect the dots by pushing in small pieces at a time to form the shape. So for this, I'm going to do a heart. I'm going to do it kind of offset to the left. So I'm just going to go and make the shape of a heart with dots. And also remember when you're making your holes that you don't want to push all the way through the clay. You're just trying to go just a little bit into it because you're basically making an impression of that shape. You're not going all the way through. Okay, so there's a heart. So now I'm going to go back and slowly, and you're not drawing a line, you're just going to puncture all the areas in between those holes real lightly. You're just like breaking that clay out of the way and making a light impression of that shape. Real soft. Another thing to keep in mind during this process is that it is a tedious process and you will make mistakes and errors, and that's okay. And if that happens, you just take this piece, ball it up again, and flatten it back out and start over. You have to be patient, and practice makes perfect. So I can guarantee you that the first time around, I had to do that quite a few times. And sometimes you might just need to step away from it, take a break if you start to get frustrated, because this is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be relaxing. And it makes, it should be something that makes you feel accomplished. Like, yeah, I made this. So just think about that. I know it's made me very much more appreciative of the jewelry that I own. Like, wow, a lot went into that. Okay, so yeah, so there's my heart. The next thing I would suggest, you can use like the tip of your paintbrush. I actually have a wooden dowel that you can press down. Whatever you have around the house that you want to push down. And also I want to point out that the right side of my heart's not as wide as the left, but that's okay because I can fix it whenever I'm pressing it down. So first I'm going to move with the spot that I like. So you're just going to press that clay down, just slightly, just like you're stamping it down. But you want to be very slow and very light. And you're just basically pressing it down to make that impression. Now on this side, I'm going to go a little further out to make it more rounded. Okay, now that side looks deeper, so I'm going to go back on the left and press down a little bit more. And maybe press up against the sides a little. Now, like I said, anything at this point you're wanting to details, you're wanting to, make your details the way you want them to look. So you go back and fix any kind of, you stop and look, okay, what do I like, what do I not like, and then go back and fix it. Because you still have all that time before it dries up. So you want to make those changes now. Because once it's done, it's done. Imperfections and all. Just going to get these sides a little bit more uniform. So now I'm going to show you another technique where we've made the impression of the heart, but now I want to go in and add some dots for an extra kind of design. So I'm basically going to outline it in small dots on the inside of that impression. All right, so now we're ready to go on to the next step where we're going to cut out our charm. You can either use a pre-made circle cutter that you might have at home. You can use a quarter because the charms are about the shape of a quarter. This is the size of one. So you can take the quarter, set it on top, and then take a knife and cut it out. Or like I like to do, the jumbo glue sticks are perfect size. So I'm going to line up my edge with the very outside of the heart and make the cut. Now at this point, we're going to press all the way down through the clay because we're cutting it out. Here you go. So here's the excess. I'm going to put this away into the bag, save for later, and now I'm going to tap this out. There we go. So it is a little out of shape from being pushed out, so we're going to push it down, get it back to the shape it was, get a good circle. You can roll it a little bit on the sides, and then you're going to want to flatten out the back. So now we're ready to put in our inspirational word, our initials, our name along here. If you wanted more space, you could have made a smaller heart, a lot smaller. I'm going to write the word hope. So you do the same dot to dot pattern as you did with the shape, but now you're going to do letters. Okay, so HOPE. So now I'm going to go puncture all the holes in between so that the words, the letters all come together. So. And remember again that you're not pushing all the way through. You're just trying to make, an impression, make lines. Get a close up. Okay, I'm going to continue. So now at this point you decide if you want the charm to be on a necklace or a keychain or if you want it to be a magnet. If you want it to hang or dangle on something, you're going to have to make that hole. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So you'll take your toothpick, find the center when it's straight up and down, and you're going to poke a hole right in the top. And then slowly pick it up. And then what you're going to do is you're going to slowly push the toothpick through while you're spinning it. Because you got to be careful because, the clay is still, it's not dry and it can mess up. So then you're going to twist and pull back out. And there you've got a nice hole in the front, but it's looking all funky in the back. So you're going to go back and smooth that out some. Okay. Then you're going to go back through the back side with the toothpick and come out the other way. Because you want to make sure that this hole is big enough to fit your string through, because that could be a major problem trying to get thread through a hole. you can straighten those edges a little bit more, flatten them out around the toothpick. And you pull that out slowly. All right. So now you've got a nice uniform hole, both sides, for your string to go through. And if you're happy with how everything is here, then you're good to let it set overnight. And we'll come back tomorrow to add the paint. All right, so your charm has had a chance to dry overnight. So now we're ready to paint. However, because this is air drying clay and not polymer clay, we have to protect it with some Mod Podge first. Let that dry for a couple hours, and then we'll come back and add the paint. Because otherwise, whenever we add the wet paint to the clay and try to rub it off, the clay itself becomes wet again, and so it starts smearing off as well. So then you lose your shape around like the letters and the fine details. Okay, so for this step, you're just gonna need your paintbrush or a Q-tip, and then you're gonna open up the Mod Podge. And you're just gonna start putting all over it. And you do want to definitely stick the hole with the toothpick because you don't want that hole closing up. And like I said, the glue doesn't take that long to dry. Find something around the house that you can kind of like hang it on so that all the surfaces can dry without being touched. Okay. Poke that hole. All right, so you've got a nice coat going around the edges. And then you just set that aside to dry for a couple hours, and then we'll come back and put on the paint. Okay, so your first coat of Mod Podge has dried, so now we're ready to add the paint. The things you're gonna need is a wet paper towel, a dry paper towel, your paintbrush, possibly a toothpick, and your paint. And you're gonna wanna have that paper towel handy because as we add the paint, we're gonna wipe it off immediately afterwards. And hopefully that first coat of Mod Podge is gonna help it to where it doesn't stain the entire thing of clay. I didn't want it to be red as an outline, so I added some white to the red paint that I already had to give it a pink color. So you're gonna dab your paintbrush in the color or your Q-tip or your sponge, whatever it is that you're using. And you're gonna wanna do this real quick. So have your paper towel handy. And we're going to add it into the heart first. So we're gonna go inside the heart. Okay, and then I'm gonna wipe it clean. Definitely want it on off of the outside. We kind of want it to just stay in the little holes that I made. So we're gonna kind of rub it to where it's just really kind of outlining it. And it's just gonna stay in those little cracks. But you don't want it to stay in the middle stuff, you're just kind of outlining that heart. And there's gonna be little imperfections and that's okay. But yeah, it looks like this Mod Podge really helped to where it's not taking away the clay texture. It's just wiping away the paint. So there, we have a little outline of the heart. So now I'm gonna go in and add it to the letters. And we're gonna do the same thing with this. Now you see right here, it looks like the Mod Podge kind of came off right here in this point. So at that, the clay is wanting to come off. So if you're doing this, that could happen to you. So you just want to make sure that you have a good layer of that Mod Podge set before you do the paint. But it looks like it's helped vary. It made this process super easy compared to how I've done it in the past. So this is definitely the way I would recommend going for the future. So that's really it for the paint. So then you're going to set that aside to dry. And then we'll come back with the last coat of Mod Podge to finish it up. Okay, so the paint has had time to dry. So now we're going to put the last layer of Mod Podge to seal the paint and then let that dry. So you'll need your paintbrush. And that little imperfection there will dry and you won't even really notice it once it's dry. So yeah, it looks kind of funky right now, but it'll dry all nice and clear, and then you'll be able to see the paint. Then here's the last step. You're going to remove the adhesive backing from the magnet and secure it to the back of the charm. This is one of my first ones I did, as you can tell, and it has a hole, and that's okay because you can always turn the charm that you used for a necklace into a magnet. Okay, and so you're gonna press it down and hold for 20 seconds, and it should be good to go. Okay, so here's our charm that we've turned into a magnet. Here's the magnet on the back. So now we're gonna go ahead and test it out. So we've made a functional magnet. Okay, so if you've decided to use this charm to turn into a necklace, then the next step you're going to need to do is make a little clay bead. So you're going to take out some more of your clay out of your bag, and you can use like the plain tan color that it comes with, and you're going to shape it into a small ball. So you just roll it around like a ball, and then you're going to start shaping it into the desired form for a bead. So you'll start kind of like using your fingertips to give it some shape. And this is kind of like the idea of what I want. So I see that I have too much clay, so I'm going to cut that in half. And you want to stick the rest back in your bag and zip it back up because this is air drying clay and you don't want it to dry out. So roll this into a ball and just shape it. And I'm going to kind of roll it a little bit because I still want it to have like a rounded shape. And then I want it to be shorter, so I'm going to kind of push it down, roll and squeeze. All right, that looks pretty good. Okay, so now you can add details that you want to the bead. So I can use my toothpick to add some scores on the side so that it gives it some texture, kind of like this one. So you can kind of go like at an angle and kind of dent it like that. And we'll dent it in several different spots. And you still want to kind of try to keep its shape. And then you'll kind of crisscross those. And you can still kind of push it back. The last part we're going to do is we got to stick the toothpick straight through it so that we have a hole for our bead, for our string to go through. So you're going to push that straight through and you'll see it touch me around the side of your finger. And then you're going to kind of start spinning it and then pull it back through and see how this hole's a lot bigger. So you want to go from the other side as well. Go back through the hole, push through, kind of spin it. Make sure that's the shape you want. You can even kind of go back over those little scores if you want. Kind of skewer it. And it's actually best to let it dry overnight on this toothpick so that the hole stays big and open. So I'm going to kind of make a little bit deeper scores here since my fingertips were kind of on them. All right, that looks pretty good. So now we'll let this dry overnight. So we're going to add some Mod Podge to this third bead and let it dry just so we can see the difference between painting the one with Mod Podge and painting the ones without Mod Podge. But just with the charms, it seems like the Mod Podge helps protect the clay itself, and then the paint just falls right into those cracks easily. So our layer of Mod Podge was able to dry. So now I'm going to go ahead and add the layer of paint in the cracks. You don't need a whole lot of paint. It goes a long ways for this because you're not trying to like paint the whole bead. You're just trying to paint the cracks. It goes in the little cracks better by using the Mod Podge, so I would highly suggest doing that before you paint. So we'll let this dry. We add one more coat of Mod Podge, and then we'll be ready to string our charms together. Okay, so we've finally made it through to the last step. Your charm and your bead have both been sealed with the Mod Podge and they're ready to be turned into a necklace. So you're going to take your string and fold it to where the ends meet, and then that you have a little loop on the end, and you're going to run that loop through the front of your charm. You might need a little help because I did make the hole a little small. I could have made it bigger to make it easier, but we're just going to use a paper clip to push it through. Okay, you just grab it. All right, and you don't need to pull it that far. It's going to make that little loop on the back side. There we go. Then you're going to take the ends of the string and bring it through the loop in the back of the charm and pull. Then you just pull that nice and tight. And now you're ready to string your bead. So you're going to put one end of the string through the bead. I mean, this craft is not the easiest, but it's very rewarding in the end. Okay, so I got one. Now I need to push the other one through. And I kind of take this string and pull it tight against the walls so that we have room to fit this other thread through. And set it on top. There we go. Pull it through. Alrighty. So pull both strings through to where your bead is sitting on top of the charm. Like so. Now you're going to take the string, separate them, and tie it in a knot. Make the knot go on top of the bead. And you may need to do a second or a third. With this embroidery floss, it's pretty thin, so you need to, I'd triple it. Now if you were using like hemp string, then you would only maybe need to do the one knot. Okay, so that'll keep it in place. And then the last thing you need to do is bring your ends together. And you're going to go ahead and make a double knot to complete the necklace. And you can cut off the excess if you'd like. And there we have it. We have our clay charm necklace.